I've been driving this route for years, hundreds of miles of lonely highways and desolate backroads. It's a routine that's become second nature to me, a familiar rhythm that lulls me into a sense of security as I navigate the winding roads of the American heartland. But tonight, as I find myself running behind schedule, I make the fateful decision to take a shortcut, a narrow dirt road that cuts through the heart of the countryside. It's a route I've never taken before, but the promise of shaving off a few precious hours from my journey is too tempting to resist. As I round a bend in the road, my headlights catch a glimpse of something in the distance, a towering silhouette against the night sky. Curiosity piqued, I steer my truck off the main road and follow the dirt track toward the mysterious structure. As I draw closer, I realize that I've stumbled upon an abandoned quarry, an immense pit gouged out of the earth, its depths shrouded in darkness. The air is heavy with the scent of earth and decay, and a chill runs down my spine as I realize that I'm completely alone in this desolate place. Ignoring the sense of unease gnawing at the pit of my stomach, I cut the engine and step out of the cab, my boots crunching on the gravel beneath my feet. The silence is oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of insects and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. I approach the edge of the quarry cautiously, peering over the edge into the yawning abyss below. It's a dizzying sight, the sheer drop plunging down into the darkness like the gaping maw of some ancient beast. As I scan the area, my gaze falls upon a series of rusted metal structures scattered along the edge of the quarry, a crumbling conveyor belt, a dilapidated crane, the skeletal remains of what was once a bustling industrial site. Curiosity getting the better of me, I begin to explore the area, my footsteps echoing off the walls of the quarry as I make my way through the deserted machinery. It's eerie, the sense of abandonment that hangs heavy in the air, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm trespassing in a place I was never meant to be. As I wander deeper into the quarry, I come across a series of rusted signs warning of danger and urging caution. They're faded and weather-worn, their messages barely legible, but the sense of foreboding they evoke is unmistakable. I pause to read one of the signs, my brow furrowing in confusion as I try to decipher the faded text. It's then that I notice something glinting in the darkness, a flash of metal catching the light of my flashlight. Intrigued, I move closer, my heart pounding in my chest as I realize what I've stumbled upon, a series of abandoned vehicles, their twisted frames half buried in the earth. It's a chilling sight, the rusted hulks of cars and trucks lying silent and still, as if frozen in time. As I explore further, I come across evidence of a tragic accident, a mangled guardrail, a trail of debris leading down into the depths of the quarry. It's a sobering reminder of the dangers that lurk in this desolate place, and a shiver runs down my spine as I realize just how close I've come to disaster. But it's not until I stumble upon a series of makeshift memorials, a collection of weather-beaten crosses and faded photographs, that the true horror of the quarry's past begins to dawn on me. These are the remnants of lives lost, the silent witnesses to a tragedy that unfolded in this remote corner of the world. As I stand among the memorials, a sense of unease washes over me, the weight of the quarry's dark history pressing down on my shoulders like a physical burden. It's then that I hear it, the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the darkness, growing steadily closer with each passing moment. Heart pounding, I spin around, my flashlight cutting through the gloom as I search for the source of the noise. But there's nothing, only the empty expanse of the quarry, stretching out into the night like a vast, yawning chasm. I tell myself it's just my imagination, that the stress of the road has finally caught up with me. But as I make my way back to the truck, the sense of being watched follows me like a shadow, a lingering presence that refuses to be ignored. With a final glance over my shoulder, I climb back into the cab and start the engine, eager to leave this cursed place behind. But as I pull away from the quarry, the feeling of unease lingers, a nagging doubt that whispers in the back of my mind, reminding me that some secrets are best left buried in the darkness. Let's hop on to story number 2, but before I begin reading, make sure that you have subscribed to Mr. Scare for regular horror podcasts. It was a cold and rainy night when I pulled into the warehouse on the outskirts of town. The place looked deserted, its windows boarded up and its doors chained shut. But I had a job to do, and I wasn't about to let a little bad weather deter me. As I stepped out of my truck and approached the entrance, a chill ran down my spine. There was something about the place that didn't sit right with me, a sense of unease that seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog. I made my way inside, my footsteps echoing off the empty walls as I searched for the cargo I'd been sent to retrieve. The interior was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a flickering overhead light that cast long shadows across the floor. As I rounded a corner, I stumbled upon a stack of wooden crates tucked away in a darkened corner of the warehouse. They were sealed tight, their contents a mystery to me. But I didn't have time to linger. I had a deadline to meet, and I wasn't about to let a few crates stand in my way. With a grunt of effort, I hoisted one of the crates onto my shoulder and made my way back to the truck. The rain had picked up now, pounding against the roof of the warehouse like a relentless drumbeat. I loaded the crates into the back of my truck and set off into the night, the road stretching out before me like a ribbon of asphalt, disappearing into the darkness. But as I drove, a sense of unease settled over me, a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. It started with a strange noise, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the depths of the truck itself. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, but as the night wore on, the noises grew louder and more insistent, filling the cab with an oppressive sense of dread. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but my mind kept wandering back to the warehouse and the mysterious cargo I'd picked up there. What was in those crates? And why did they seem to be affecting me so profoundly? As I drove, I began to notice other strange occurrences, my headlights flickering on and off, my radio crackling with static, my GPS leading me down deserted back roads that seemed to stretch on forever. And then there were the accidents, near misses and close calls that left my heart pounding in my chest and my hands shaking on the wheel. It was as if the road itself was conspiring against me, a malevolent force determined to see me fail. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled over me like a heavy blanket, but it was no use. The more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it became, until it felt like I was drowning in a sea of fear and uncertainty. Desperate for answers, I pulled off the road and parked the truck in a secluded spot by the side of the highway. With trembling hands, I pried open one of the crates and peered inside, my heart sinking as I caught sight of the contents, a collection of strange, otherworldly artifacts that sent a chill down my spine. I knew then that I had to get rid of the cargo, to rid myself of the curse that seemed to have taken hold of me. But as I reached for the crates, a voice echoed in my mind, a dark, sinister whisper that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the earth. "Leave them be," it hissed. "They belong to us now." I recoiled in horror, my blood turning to ice in my veins. I knew then that I was in over my head, that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. With a sense of dread weighing heavy on my shoulders, I climbed back into the cab and set off into the night, the road stretching out before me like a twisted labyrinth leading me further and further into the heart of darkness. And as I drove, I knew that I was no longer in control, that I was nothing more than a pawn in a game that I could never hope to win. It was a moonless night, the kind that swallowed the world in darkness and left me feeling like the only soul on the road. I was making my way across an old bridge that spanned a churning river below, the sound of rushing water echoing in the stillness of the night. As I drove, my mind wandered, drifting between thoughts of the long road ahead and memories of the life I'd left behind. But my reverie was shattered when my truck suddenly sputtered and stalled, leaving me stranded in the middle of the bridge with nothing but the inky blackness for company. Cursing under my breath, I tried to restart the engine, but it refused to turn over. Panic began to rise in my chest like bile as I realized that I was completely alone, miles from civilization with no one to hear my cries for help. I was just about to give up and resign myself to spending the night on the bridge when I heard it, the faintest whisper, like the rustling of leaves on a breeze. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to listen, but the sound had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Shaking off my unease, I reached for my flashlight and stepped out of the cab, the darkness closing in around me like a suffocating blanket. I shone the light beneath the bridge, half expecting to find some mechanical fault that could explain the sudden stall, but there was nothing there, just shadows dancing in the beam of my flashlight. With a sigh of frustration, I climbed back into the cab and tried the engine again, but it still refused to start. It was then that I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like the sound of footsteps echoing against the concrete below. My blood ran cold as I realized that I was not alone on the bridge, that there was something down there in the darkness with me. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it beneath the bridge once more, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched for the source of the sound. And that's when I saw them, the shadows, moving and shifting in the darkness like specters in the night. I blinked, convinced that I was seeing things, but when I looked again, the shadows were still there, twisting and writhing in the beam of my flashlight. Panic surged through me like a tidal wave as I realized that the shadows were moving towards me, creeping ever closer with each passing moment. I scrambled back into the cab and slammed the door shut, my heart hammering in my chest as I frantically tried to restart the engine. But no matter how hard I tried, the truck remained stubbornly silent, leaving me trapped on the bridge with whatever lurked in the darkness below. I could hear the whispers growing louder now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to echo inside my skull. Desperate for escape, I reached for my phone, but when I tried to dial for help, I found that there was no signal, not even a single bar to cling to in my moment of need. I was completely cut off from the outside world, alone and defenseless against whatever was lurking in the shadows. Hours passed in a blur of terror and uncertainty, the whispers growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. I tried to block them out, to focus on anything other than the darkness that surrounded me, but it was no use. The whispers had taken hold of me, their words seeping into my mind like poison. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I sat there in the darkness, trembling and alone, unsure of what would come next. But just as I began to hope that the ordeal was over, I heard it, the sound of footsteps, echoing against the concrete below. My blood ran cold as I realized that the shadows were still there, waiting for me in the darkness. And as they drew closer, I knew that there was no escape, that I was doomed to spend eternity trapped on the bridge, with nothing but the whispers and the shadows for company. As a long-haul trucker, I've seen my fair share of strange things on the road. But nothing could have prepared me for the night I received a distress signal over my radio that would lead me into a nightmare from which I could barely escape. It was a chilly evening in late October, and I was making my way through a desolate stretch of highway in the heart of rural Wyoming. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving me alone with the darkness and the endless expanse of open road. I was lost in thought, the monotony of the road lulling me into a trance-like state, when a crackle of static erupted from my radio, jolting me back to reality. I reached out to adjust the dial, thinking it was just interference from the surrounding terrain, but then I heard it, a voice, faint and distorted, pleading for help. "Is anyone out there? Please, I need help. I'm lost and I don't know where I am." I frowned, my heart pounding in my chest as I listened to the frantic voice on the other end of the line. It was a woman's voice, tinged with fear and desperation, and something about it sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced at the dashboard, trying to pinpoint the source of the distress signal, but the display showed nothing but static. It was as if the signal was coming from nowhere, drifting through the air like a ghostly whisper. "Hello? Can anyone hear me?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. I was just a trucker, after all, a lone traveler on the road with no way of knowing who or what was on the other end of the line. But something in me couldn't ignore the plea for help, and before I knew it, I was grabbing my radio and responding. "This is truck 4376. I hear you. Can you tell me your location?" There was a pause, and then the voice came back, clearer this time, but still tinged with fear. I don't know. I was driving through the mountains, and then I got lost. Please, you have to help me." I felt a surge of adrenaline as I listened to the woman's words. Without thinking, I grabbed a map from the glove compartment and began scanning it, trying to match her description of the area with the landmarks around me. "I'm heading east on Highway 20, I said, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. "If you can give me any more details about where you are, I'll do my best to find you." There was a moment of silence, and then the voice came back, softer now, almost a whisper. I think I see headlights. They're coming towards me. Oh God, please hurry." My blood ran cold as I listened to the woman's words. It was clear now that she was in serious danger, and I was her only hope for salvation. Without wasting another moment, I slammed my foot down on the accelerator and sped down the highway, my heart pounding in my chest as I raced to reach her in time. But as I drove, the road seemed to stretch on endlessly, the darkness closing in around me like a suffocating blanket. The headlights of oncoming cars flashed by in a blur, but there was no sign of the woman or the source of the distress signal. I began to panic, my mind racing with thoughts of what might have happened to her. Had she been abducted? Injured? Lost in the wilderness with no hope of rescue? And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw it, a figure standing by the side of the road, waving frantically as I approached. Relief flooded through me as I pulled over and rolled down the window, but as the figure drew closer, I realized with horror that it wasn't the woman from the distress signal at all. It was something else entirely. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, twin orbs of malevolence that seemed to pierce straight through me. Its skin was pale and clammy, stretched tight over its skeletal frame like a shroud. And as it opened its mouth to speak, a chill ran down my spine at the sight of its razor-sharp teeth gleaming in the moonlight. "Help me," it whispered, its voice a sickening blend of agony and hunger. "Please, you have to help me." I recoiled in horror, the hair standing up on the back of my neck as I realized that I was face to face with something beyond human comprehension. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't the woman I'd been trying to save. It was something far more sinister, something that had lured me into its trap with its siren song of distress. With a surge of adrenaline, I slammed my foot down on the accelerator and tore down the highway, leaving the creature behind in a cloud of dust and exhaust. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, lurking in the shadows and waiting for its next victim. And as the miles stretched on and the night wore on, I knew that I would never be able to forget the sound of its voice, echoing in my mind like a nightmare from which I could never wake. As a trucker who spent most of my days on the road, I had seen my fair share of strange and unusual sights. But nothing could have prepared me for the night I stumbled upon the Carnival of Nightmares. It was a dreary evening in late October, and I was making my way through the desolate highways of rural Texas. The sky was shrouded in darkness, and the only sound was the low hum of my truck's engine as I pressed onward into the night. As fatigue began to set in, I spotted a sign for a roadside attraction up ahead, a carnival, it claimed, with promises of thrills and excitement. Intrigued, I decided to pull over and take a break, hoping that a bit of distraction would help to break up the monotony of the road. I parked my truck in the gravel lot and made my way towards the carnival, but as I drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, and there was not a soul in sight. I hesitated for a moment, considering turning back and continuing on my journey, but curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed onward into the heart of the carnival. As I walked through the deserted fairgrounds, I couldn't help but marvel at the twisted and grotesque attractions that surrounded me. There were dilapidated carnival rides with rusted metal frames, decrepit game booths with faded paint peeling off in strips, and eerie circus tents with tattered canvas flapping in the wind. But what struck me the most was the absence of any patrons. It was as if the carnival had been abandoned in the dead of night, leaving behind nothing but empty rides and silent tents. As I wandered deeper into the carnival, I began to feel a sense of unease creeping over me. There was something about the atmosphere that made my skin crawl, a sense of impending dread that hung heavy in the air like a thick fog. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I heard it, a low, sinister laugh echoing through the darkness, followed by the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. I spun around, my heart racing as I searched for the source of the noise, but there was no one there. Just empty carnival games and deserted rides stretching out into the night. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling with fear. There was no response, but the laughter continued, growing louder and more menacing with each passing moment. I turned to flee, but before I could make my escape, a voice spoke out from the shadows, a voice that sent a chill down my spine and froze me in place with fear. "Welcome, traveler, to the Carnival of Nightmares," it said, the words dripping with malice. "I've been expecting you." I looked around frantically, trying to locate the source of the voice, but it seemed to be coming from all around me, as if it were emanating from the very air itself. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fear. "I am the ringmaster," the voice replied, and as it spoke, a figure emerged from the darkness, a tall, gaunt man dressed in a tattered black suit with a top hat perched precariously on his head. He grinned at me, his teeth gleaming in the moonlight, and I felt a surge of terror coursing through my veins at the sight of him. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The ringmaster's grin widened, and he gestured towards the carnival attractions that surrounded us. "I want to play a game," he said, his voice oozing with excitement. "A game of life and death, where only the strongest will survive." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I realized what he was saying. This was no ordinary carnival, it was a trap, a twisted game orchestrated by the enigmatic ringmaster for his own sadistic pleasure. But even as fear gripped me, a part of me couldn't help but be drawn in by the thrill of the unknown. I had always been a risk-taker, a thrill-seeker, and the thought of facing off against the ringmaster in his own twisted game filled me with a strange sense of exhilaration. And so, with a heart pounding in my chest and adrenaline coursing through my veins, I accepted the ringmaster's challenge and prepared to face whatever horrors awaited me in the carnival of nightmares.